The wind was sharp that night in New York City, sweeping through the streets and tugging at the corners of Sarah Miller's thin jacket. She pulled it tighter around herself, wishing she could afford something warmer, but she pushed the thought aside. Her son, Ethan, was waiting at home and she couldn't be late. Sarah was a single mother working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Her first shift was at a grocery store, stocking shelves in the morning. Her second was at a small 24-hour diner where she waited tables until nearly midnight. She often stumbled into her tiny apartment exhausted, but she kept going, for Ethan. That night, her shift at the diner had been particularly draining. A group of college kids had left a mess without tipping, and the manager had snapped at her for being too slow. She smiled through it all, as she always did. Smiling made the burden feel lighter, at least for a while. When her shift ended, Sarah changed into her worn sneakers, tucked her tips, barely 18s, into her pocket, and stepped outside. The streets glistened with a thin sheen of rain, neon lights reflecting off the puddles. She adjusted her pace, eager to catch the last bus home. As she hurried along the sidewalk, Sarah noticed movement ahead. A man, perhaps in his late 50s, staggered near the curb. Before she could process what was happening, he clutched his chest and collapsed onto the pavement. Gasps rose from bystanders. A few people pulled out their phones, some to call 911, others to record the scene, but nobody moved closer. Fear and hesitation froze them in place. Sarah's heart raced. She glanced around, waiting for someone, anyone, to step forward. But when no one did, she dropped her bag and sprinted to the man's side. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked urgently, kneeling beside him. His face was pale, his lips tinged blue. The crowd whispered, but still no one acted. Sarah's hands shook, but her instincts took over. She remembered a safety class from years ago in high school, CPR basics that most people had long forgotten. She positioned her hands over his chest and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, she counted under her breath, pressing firmly, rhythmically. "Somebody call 911, she shouted. A woman in the crowd finally dialed, her voice trembling as she relayed the situation. Sarah bent closer, tilting the man's head and giving 2 quick rescue breaths. "Stay with me, sir. Don't you give up," she pleaded. Her arms burned from the effort, but she didn't stop. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, faint sirens wailed in the distance. Relief washed over her, but she kept going, determined to keep the stranger alive until help arrived. The paramedics rushed in, gently moving Sarah aside. "Ma'am, you did great," one of them told her as they took over. She stepped back, her chest heaving, watching as they worked on him with oxygen and medical equipment. The man was loaded onto the stretcher, his condition still uncertain. Before Sarah could say or do anything more, the ambulance doors slammed shut and the vehicle sped off into the night. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring about what had just happened. But Sarah didn't linger. She picked up her bag, brushed the dirt from her knees, and walked toward the bus stop. Her hands still trembled, but her heart was calm. She didn't do it for recognition or reward. She did it because it was the right thing to do. By the time Sarah reached home, it was well past midnight. Ethan was asleep on the couch, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Sarah kissed his forehead gently, then sank onto a chair, exhausted. She thought about the man she had saved. Was he going to survive? Did he have a family waiting for him? She would never know, she told herself. She was just a nobody in a big city. But fate had other plans. What Sarah didn't know was that the man she had saved wasn't just anyone. His name was Richard Hayes, a powerful CEO with a reputation that stretched across Wall Street. A man whose decisions influenced markets, companies, and thousands of lives. A man with more wealth than Sarah could ever imagine. To the world, Richard Hayes was untouchable, wealthy, successful, admired, and envied. But in that one moment on a rainy New York street, he was simply a human being whose life rested in the hands of a poor single mom who refused to walk away. And that night, without knowing it, Sarah had changed both of their destinies forever. The morning rush at the diner was always chaotic, coffee pots steaming, plates clattering, and customers impatient for their breakfasts. Sarah moved quickly between tables, balancing trays with practiced ease. To her, it was just another day of survival. But when the bell over the diner door jingled, the room seemed to still. A group of suited men entered, commanding attention instantly. They didn't look like the diner's usual crowd. Their polished shoes and expensive watches stood out against the cracked vinyl booths and sticky counters. Sarah's heart skipped when she saw the man walking behind them. He looked healthier than when she last saw him, standing tall, his skin no longer pale. His eyes searched the diner until they found hers. It was him, the man from that rainy night, the one she had knelt beside, begging to stay alive. Richard Hayes. Sarah froze, the coffee pot in her hand trembling. Before she could gather her thoughts, Richard walked straight to her, ignoring the curious stares of other customers. "You saved my life," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. He reached for her hands, his grip gentle but firm. "I've been searching for you since that night." Sarah's mouth went dry. I just did what anyone would do." "No," Richard said firmly, shaking his head. "You did what no one else did. You stepped forward when everyone else stepped back." She blinked at him, overwhelmed. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She glanced at the suits behind him. They were clearly his assistants or bodyguards. Why would such an important man come looking for her? Richard seemed to sense her unease. He smiled gently, almost humbly. "My name is Richard Hayes. I run a company. Some call me successful, but none of that mattered when I was lying on that sidewalk. What mattered was you." The name struck her like lightning. Everyone in New York knew the name Richard Hayes, the billionaire CEO with skyscrapers and stock markets tied to him. But standing in front of her now, he wasn't the powerful figure from the news. He was just a man, alive because of her. "I want to repay you," Richard continued. "Anything you need, anything your son needs." "No," Sarah interrupted quickly, shaking her head. "Please, you don't owe me anything. I didn't do it for money." Her voice cracked, her modesty genuine. She didn't want pity. She didn't want charity. For the first time in years, Richard laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "That's exactly why I want to help you, because you're not asking." Over the weeks that followed, Richard returned to the diner often. At first, Sarah thought it was just to thank her, but she soon realized he wanted more. Conversation, normalcy, a place where he wasn't treated like a king. They would talk during her breaks. She told him about her son Ethan, her struggles as a single mom, and her dreams of one day owning a little bakery. Richard, in turn, shared things no one expected from a man. "I've spent my life chasing success," he admitted one evening, his gaze distant. "But lying on that street, I realized how little it meant if I didn't have someone to share it with." Like him, that despite all his wealth, he often felt alone. Sarah didn't know what to say. She was used to customers boasting about vacations or cars, not confessing loneliness. And yet she saw truth in his eyes. The first time Richard met Ethan was by accident. Sarah had brought him to the diner one Saturday morning because she couldn't afford a babysitter. Ethan, shy at first, hid behind his mother until Richard knelt to his level. "Do you like dinosaurs?" Richard asked with a smile. Ethan's eyes lit up. Within minutes, the boy was chattering excitedly about his favorite T-Rex toy. Sarah watched in quiet awe. Her son rarely warmed up to strangers so quickly. That moment changed everything. Richard didn't just admire Sarah anymore. He admired her world, the simplicity of their bond, the way Sarah put Ethan above all else, the strength it took for her to carry so much on her shoulders. It humbled him in ways his boardroom never could. Their friendship deepened slowly, naturally. Richard would sometimes drive Sarah and Ethan home after late shifts, insisting it wasn't safe for them to walk alone. He began helping discreetly, fixing the leaky faucet in her apartment, bringing groceries, covering Ethan's school supplies. At first, Sarah resisted, but Richard always found gentle ways to remind her it wasn't charity, it was gratitude. And somewhere along the way, gratitude became affection. Sarah found herself smiling when she saw him waiting at the diner. She noticed the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, how he never treated her like she was less because of her circumstances. With him, she didn't feel poor. She felt valued. One evening, after walking her home, Richard hesitated at the apartment door. The city lights cast a glow over his face, and his voice was quieter than usual. "Sarah," he began, "I know our worlds are different. I know I don't deserve to ask this, but I can't ignore what I feel anymore. I care about you, about Ethan, about us." Sarah's breath caught. For years, she had convinced herself love wasn't for her, that her job was to raise her son and survive. But looking at Richard, she saw sincerity, not pity. She saw a man who valued her strength, not her weakness. Tears welled in her eyes. "Richard, I don't know if I can fit into your world." He shook his head gently. "Then I'll fit into yours. From that moment, their lives intertwined. Richard didn't sweep Sarah away into a fairy tale mansion overnight. He walked beside her step by step, respecting her independence. He supported her dream of owning a bakery, helping her open a small shop where she could finally share her recipes with the community. Ethan thrived too, growing close to Richard, who became more than just a friend. He became family. In return, Sarah gave Richard something no amount of wealth could buy, a sense of belonging, of love, of home. Months later, as they stood together outside her bakery on opening day, Sarah leaned against him, her heart full. "Funny," she whispered, "how one night changed everything." Richard smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "No," he said softly, "you changed everything." Together their worlds, once so far apart, merged into one, a story not of wealth or poverty, but of courage, gratitude, and second chances. Because sometimes the richest hearts truly are found in the poorest places.